everyone. Go.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Topical Talkology. Hello, Theo, you all right?
Very, very good. Much, much better. In fact, coronavirus apparently only causes a very mild illness in most cases, whereas I can tell you my norovirus the last couple of weeks was unbelievably wearing, grueling.
Oh, I mean, look, we can't really talk about this. We can't really sort of. To be able to stick on topic on this on a weekly basis, you know, we can't avoid talking about the coronavirus right now because there's a lot of uncertainty out there in the market. Now, you know, and there's lots of many different theories. I mean, I had one colleague of mine, rather, and his son is a researcher in diseases, infectious diseases, and apparently the coronavirus is actually probably a little bit more serious than meets the eye, but they just don't want to cause any more panic than what it is, but it's causing enough uncertainty in the market for everything to react. The stock market's responded to that. Businesses are, I mean, in some cases, I think there was on the BBC website yesterday, was saying even if you've got a mild cold, they suggest you stay at home and self-quarantine, for example.
You see, nonsense.
Which people will take advantage of fully.
Yeah. Now, we're not a medically licensed entity, but clearly most of the hysteria is media-driven nonsense, because we know that the statistics show that in a developed country where you have ready access to healthcare, the mortality is no more than the flu. But you do need more intensive care beds for those who are seriously infected, without which mortality goes up to about 2.5%.
Look, I mean, the thing is, how much of this is being blown out of proportion by the media, I don't know. I mean, I've got to say, there's a point with me where I'm beginning to take it a little bit more seriously than I did last week.
But you know why? Repetition.
Of course,
so you're being bludgeoned into believing it.
I do accept those factors. I mean, in our area alone, there's 5 cases because we don't live too far from the airport. But the thing is, a lot of the uncertainty it's actually causing. Now, we're talking about this before the podcast. Does it benefit the developed countries over the developing countries, who would probably be suffering more in terms of economically than we would be? And is that something that is manipulated is the wrong word, but almost welcomed by some of the more developed countries, which would give them more leverage? I mean, what do you think? Have I made that clear, by the way? I'm not sure if I have.
Well, what you're suggesting is that there's a hidden agenda. And I think you're absolutely right. Wherever logic, wherever there's a mismatch between logic and observed effect, there usually is a hidden agenda. So, for instance, the markets. Now, the markets, if you look at the S&P 30 or the 500, it's lost 1/6 of its value in a couple of weeks. I mean, that's a catastrophe, but the fact is that the market was overbought in the first place. It kept on going up. It was a bubble. It had to go down. Now, it's the large institutions that actually control the market, and anyone who knows trading understands that it is entirely manipulated by the large institutions who use news as an excuse for the market to move.
Yeah, because potentially what's happened, because it was, let's say, getting out of control, almost like what happened in 2008. This is almost like a good excuse to be able to blame
something. Yeah,
something that was a bursting point, and sort of get it down to more of a baseline sort of level.
Spot on.
Because you were talking about, just quickly, Lebanon right now earlier on, weren't you?
Well, that's the other thing, you see. So the price of oil has almost halved in a couple of weeks. Halved. Imagine that. And Lebanon has defaulted on loans already. This is how certain they were of having ready access to cash. what people need to understand is that the price of oil, the price of extracting oil, can be up to $20, $30, $40 a barrel. So if it's heading down to $30 a barrel, then some of these countries are actually losing money. Now there are places like Saudi Arabia who are so well established that they've already got it down to $2 or $3 a barrel cost, but a lot of other of these Middle Eastern countries are going to be on their knees. So it's the equivalent of draconian economic sanctions on these countries. So there is, it's the flow of money, it's control, isn't it? And the West is going to regain control over some of these countries who thought that they had illusions of grandiosity. Now the other great excuse for coronavirus is that the Turkish president, and everyone knows that he's a corrupt psychopath, who even his own journalists say that he's ready to put a can of kerosene and light it on his own country if it will save his own life. Because apparently he's not being paid enough by the EU, he's letting all the immigrants through, and now they're massed at the border between Turkey and Greece, and you have two hostile armies with live ammunition facing each other across the border. And it's a great excuse for the West to say, I'm sorry, too many Iranians with coronavirus. It's an infection risk. We can't have them in.
And it gives America an excuse not to actually let any immigrants in, even from Central America and things like this. So and even the UK in some ways, because Boris is looking to being able to control immigration in a more humane way, I suppose. And this is just one ideal way of being able to do it. So it does have a lot of benefits from a political perspective.
It's a sign of the times. So Brexit is just an indication of the wish of bottom-up authoritarianism. In other words, people desperately trying to regain their identity, and the three known stimuli for bottom-up authoritarianism are: 1, war; 2, famine; 3, plague or infection. So coronavirus is an imaginary plague with hardly any of the real consequences. Donald Trump has already blocked non-US nationals coming in from China. Imagine that, blocked. Now, what's interesting is that Boris Johnson has taken a very, very intelligent view on the whole matter. I think he's decided that it is like the flu, and you can't stop the flu. So he's still allowing people to come in from Italy unchecked. And I think what he's showing is he's showing a level-headed, non-panicking approach, actually. Because otherwise, if you think about it, he could easily have started giving instructions to close schools, do this, do that, but he hasn't. Because I think they've decided that you can't stop the flu, and you might as well try and educate and manage infection risk as well as possible, and bolster the medical services, because the main hit, it's not going to be on our health, because most people will hardly know they've got it. It's going to be on the vulnerable elderly. And those will be, if you think about it, as opposed to the flu, the demand on acute beds will be 4 or 5 times as much. Now that is the real catastrophe, because in the hospitals there will be people dying because they simply won't have the medical facilities to treat them. So
the thing is, when we say actually it's being blown out of proportion, in some ways we it's a contradiction to what that's actually been said, because ultimately, if that's going to create a catastrophe, then actually there's a problem there that it can't be addressed, really, because it's going to keep on spreading. And this is not going to go away anytime soon. I mean, in the last week, I've had 3 meetings cancelled because of the coronavirus. And a couple of the meetings that I attend tend to actually have people who are in their 70s. So there is a concern, particularly when they actually have to come into central London on public transport and things like that. And we know what the air circulation is like on the Underground, because that's, it's a very old tube service, I suppose, and so it's easily spread. So I've got to say, I'm becoming a little bit more concerned than I was. I was a little bit more blasé about it last week, but
well, think about it. On the Underground, you're not guaranteed to get the flu, whereas most people, how many people on a packed tube train will have the flu? Plenty is the answer. But no, not everyone goes down with the flu.
But it's not spread in the air. It's actually spread through water particles and things like this, isn't it? Through sneezing and coughing and things like this.
Touch.
So it's not carried in the air. From what I understand, it's carried through these. Just like
the normal flu, really.
Well, of course, that's how it's spread. And I think particularly in the large cities like London, it's going to be. There is a risk of catching it. I mean, some people don't even know they've had it. Some people have had it and it's gone.
The other thing that makes me wonder whether this is all a conspiracy theory is that they've given it its own special name. Because coronavirus, to any medical student, is well known to be the simple virus that causes the common cold. Now, clearly there are different strains, and this is an exceptionally nasty strain. But then they've had to give it a different name, COVID-19. But actually, it's the common cold virus.
Why was it called 19?
They had to find a number that was not significant.
That was not significant.
That's it.
For what purpose?
It would not be associated with any group or country or identity.
Right. Okay. I'll work my head around that one. I'm still not sure why that one in particular. I always thought there was like 19 different types of coronavirus that have happened, and this is the 19th one, for example.
And as usual, the media are to blame for a lot of the hysteria. Because again, you said that you're going to begin to get worried about it, but the only reason is because you're being battered by almost every possible news outlet, and so you slowly begin to believe it. You slowly begin to believe what is repeated to you.
Yeah, but there's a number of other factors. There's the factors is it more serious than people are really actually making it out to be? But governments don't want to cause even more panic than there is now.
But we know it's not, because we got the statistics.
I don't know that. I mean, we can sit here and have this conversation.
If you go to the official statistics and you look at the mortality rates in China, where there is ready access to medical care, the mortality rate is 0.16% that we know of, and it's probably lower. Where there isn't
but hasn't
access.
It doubled in the UK in the last week of the mortality rate?
Well, again, that's not accurate, because most people who have it don't know they've got it. That's the point, and that's the key thing. Everything is probably overestimated.
Because Italy they've taken a big hit in some
overestimated again. For instance, 14,000 people die a year from the flu. 14,000 in the UK.
In the UK,
yeah.
Okay.
14,000. How many have died from coronavirus? 6. I mean, those are the bald statistics.
Well, it's 6 over a short period of time.
Over a short period of time, but in the same period of time from the flu, a lot more will have died. Now, the other thing to think about is if you look at, say, panic buying. What I noticed is that, say, all the cheap pasta was sold out in the supermarket. The expensive pasta was almost completely untouched. And what's interesting is there are certain characteristics. So, for instance, the ease with which someone is disgusted by something is actually directly inversely proportional to their intelligence. So if you're highly intelligent, you're not easily disgusted. If you're highly intelligent, you're also not easily scared, because your intelligence has a chance to control your emotional response. And therefore, it's showing that the less intelligent people are being more easily scared. Otherwise,